Where's the crash site now?
Over there. We're getting closer.
Hello there, Sir from 17 once again, introducing you to another video walkthrough in my ever-enduring series, and this one is Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. And we're starting, as with all good stories, at the very first level, which is Chapter 1, The Escape. And this is going to be a hard difficulty from a fresh save, which means that I'll not be inheriting any upgrades, any moves, anything that I got in my first playthrough of the game or anything like that. This is going to be from the very beginning on the hardest setting. And this level here is pretty much a completely tutorial based level. There's no real threat of danger. There's one or two fights, but they're not difficult and they're not exactly going to tax you. There's a couple of jumping sections that you might die on if you don't quite figure out where you're going, because I remember when I first played it I wasn't too sure either and I died a few times. But aside from that, for all intents and purposes, this is 10 minutes of introductory to the world of Enslaved and the mechanics of the game that you're going to be following. So I should really start off by saying what my opinions of this game are, because I like to try and give a pseudo review in the first few videos, unless it's a bad game, because if it's a bad game I generally shit on it for the duration of the guide. But feel free to sit back and relax, because this is far from a bad game. This is a fantastic game, and it is also one of the more unique story-driven, character-driven storylines that I've ever played through as well. And here you are, anyhow, playing as the main protagonist, which is a guy called Monkey, who's just the brawn, the muscle of the game. And the lady that you're now following is a girl called Tripp, who is kind of the brains and the strategy and everything. And she's effectively enslaved you with a headband, because she can't survive on her own and she needs you. And you're now her slave to help her get to her village. And what starts off as a very, forced gathering of two people turns into something quite interesting and quite beautiful towards the end, because they grow from being enemies to being forced into this situation, into actually finding a bond with each other and creating a friendship. And it's really nice to see, because you don't generally get really good characterization in games these days. Well, in any games really, I suppose. A lot of it's just like, go here, kill this person, who gives a fuck? But luckily enough, this is a game that's focused a little bit more on the storyline, which is always nice. And it's a solid game. It's pretty simple mechanic wise. It doesn't deal too much, but what it does pretty well. It's kind of maybe 2/3 platforming, 1/3 combat, but that's not to say that there isn't a lot of combat in it. And my only real gripes with the game is that it's very animation heavy, because the developers have gone to such lengths to make Monkey, his movements very authentic and very true to his character, what with motion capture and everything. He moves like a motherfucker, so you'll push the analog and he'll take like 3 steps before he stops. There's a lot of weight to his movement, and it definitely adds something to the game. But when it comes to the combat, you'll press X twice and like a second later you'll still be watching the animation, so there's not the same precision that you would get from your standard action game that's got the subtle nuances and the cancelling abilities and things. And that is my only major gripe with it, that the combat feels a little loose at times, purely because of how delayed the reaction seems to be with everything. And I mean, the platform is glorious. The platforming is absolute pleasure to do. It's effortless, it moves, it works well, it sticks with all the conventions, and it's got some really interesting dynamic camera angles. And all on top of this is some interesting witty banter between the two main characters, and an interesting story that's got quite the twist at the end that is as unexpected as it is interesting. So it's a really good game, and I'm hoping that if there's anybody on the fence about buying it, I can help you get past that so that you can rent it, or you can just experience what this game is, because it's so very different to your standard fare these days. Because a lot of the stuff I play is almost ripped directly from something previous that was done better and maybe done slightly more interesting. And sure, this game's got platforming that's reminiscent of your Prince of Persia's, of your Uncharted's, of your Tomb Raiders, or whatever you want to say. It's got combat that's pretty simple and reminiscent of a few of those things I've just mentioned, but it manages to fuse them together in a really cohesive package that just delivers on all fronts. It doesn't try to be anything more than what it is, and it only has a handful of things, and it focuses on them, so that they're very finely tuned and and kind of different. And it's definitely a change of pace. But these are the introductions to the combat, and there's a bit of a bullshit moment to this, because when the prompts come up on the screen, like you just saw then using the X and A, you can't do anything until you do that. You have to do the prompt to make the game continue. So if you were a stubborn person and you didn't want to press the buttons, you would effectively kill the game. And my only complaints with it is when I was trying to go for the achievement for not taking any damage, I did it on this level, and I cocked up a few times because I had to do the fucking moves that the game tells you to do at the start, and when you do them, it gives the enemies an opportunity to hit you, because there is a block button on this game. It does have a limitation, but for the majority of my experience with it, it is very easy to use, and it's a win button, basically. But we're being introduced now to the first real climbing section, which is going to have us scaling the side of this aircraft. And if it's glimmering or shining even remotely, and if it's kind of tinged red, it generally means you can jump onto it, between it, and all that good stuff. And this section is just hopping across a couple of the plane parts and trying to avoid the fire when it does crop up every so often. And just enjoying the cinematic nature of the game. And a few more robots are going to get thrown at you now. But I was originally going to do like a no upgrade run of this game, because truth be told, this is not a challenging game. If you're worried about being able to beat it on hard, I had very little difficulties once I figured out how to fight. The first few chapters were a little bit challenging because I didn't realise some of the most obvious ways to win. But that aside, it is pretty simple fare. And there are a few things that you can buy with your upgrades that will definitely help you out during the game, but it all depends on what kind of player you are. And when I first went through the game, I made the mistake of buying life. Because in these kind of action, well, in action games that I'm used to, I generally buy life first because I'm not too good at the game. I don't know the patterns or the enemy's attacks. And the more life I have, the more mistakes I'm able to make before I die, before I'm ultimately punished. And for this game, I took that same approach, but I found myself not actually losing that much life. So on this walkthrough run, or this section by the way, wait for it to fire. As soon as it stops, just keep tapping forward and A. You'll notice I roll. See that roll? That's because I'm tapping forward and A. And on this section, you just jump towards this one. It looks like a jump that you can't make, but this game is kind of cinematic like that, and it makes you do some pretty bizarre angled jumps, but you'll get used to them. But anyhow, I found myself not using the life that I'd purchased, so on this run, I'm only going to be buying one health upgrade, and the reason why I buy it is actually through mistake, because I thought I was on the shield one. But for everything else, I generally try and power up certain parts of your staff, certain abilities, and I'll explain those as I buy them and the reason for me purchasing them, because there are a certain pattern to get into when it comes to the combat that's going to make this game extremely simple for you. And especially if you power up your staff, and I don't mean power up, the abilities of the staff, I mean the actual plasma damage of the gun when you unlock it, because if you power it up to max damage and you have the penetrative ability, you will destroy pretty much every enemy and you will not need to fight. And that is one of the best things about the game. Because you can do that, you can avoid probably the most tedious aspect of Enslaved, which is sometimes the combat is overly simple and it happens far too frequently. I'm also going to be exploring the levels as best I can and showing you a majority of different secret places for the orbs that you have to collect on the game. I'm not going to be finding them all purely because I couldn't fucking do it. I just tried to be as explorative as I could. Check every nook and cranny, because the more orbs that you pick up, the easier the game gets, because they are the currency that will upgrade your character, and the more upgraded you are, the easier it is to beat the game. If you're not confident in your abilities of playing the game, play through on easy first and then go on to hard with a fully maxed out character. You will have absolutely no challenge whatsoever, and it'll be a piece of cake. But if you're like me and you enjoy a challenge, then I would definitely say start directly on hard, because it's not that bad once you get used to it, and it'll add a little bit of longevity to your game, because this is not the longest of games, but by no means is it the shortest. Anyhow, this is only the introduction to it. There are, I think, about 15 chapters, something along those lines, so I will see you in those other videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope this guide helps. You take care now.